Welcome to the Rebel Rebel. I'm your host, Michael Dargie. The Rebel Rebel is a show dedicated to creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. It's a love letter to those people who think audaciously and act courageously in service of making the world a better and more interesting place.
Okay, one of the biggest challenges a lot of people have is they just don't have enough energy to do things because they're drained. Watching trees grow, it's not a fast thing. It's not a overnight thing. It's not a, hey, look, it's not a quick fix or a hack. That's what we're seeing a lot of in today's society, where we have men who are belligerent, bad leaders, and other men following them.
His approach to creating life balance is not what I expected. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but instead discovering and leaning into what works for you, from mentorship, mindfulness, and energy management, coupled with a deep connection to nature. Welcome, Purdeep Sangha, to the Rebel Rebel. Across the world, we'll find out where, is Purdeep Sangha. How are you?
Hey, Michael, I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So just for the rest of the world, where are you on this planet?
So I am just outside of Toronto, Canada. So I'm technically part of Hamilton, Ontario.
All right.
So about 45 minutes away from Buffalo.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. I grew up just outside of Toronto, so I know the area.
Oh, yeah, right on.
Wicked. So if you could, why don't you bring all of us up to speed on what you're up to right now, and then we'll, as is tradition on this show, we'll travel back in time.
Sure. Yeah. I guess aside from being a dad and
that's a big thing.
Yeah, it is a big thing. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're keeping me busy. A lot of the times they're good in terms of giving me energy. Sometimes they're at that stage where it can be somewhat draining. So my kids are a big focus for me. I'm married, been married for 13 years now. And I originally, you could say, grew up on the west coast of Canada, but moved out to Ontario. You can say, did my stint in the corporate world. And then I have my advisory firms, and I am an entrepreneur by, you can say, trade. Have businesses in different sectors. But primarily my biggest passion is helping other business owners, professionals, people be successful. So not only in their business life, so growing, scaling their business or their career, but also in their personal life. Because to be able to scale your business or your career and do it properly, where you actually feel like you're being successful in life, it takes a big effort on the personal side. And a lot of times I see a lot of people, I'm going to say, imbalanced.
Yeah.
And challenged. And what I think a lot of people need to realize is that, if you structure your personal life properly, it can enhance your business world significantly, rather than, holding you back.
Interesting. Okay. So let's unpack that just really briefly. I want to dive deep into this stuff, in a bit, but I'm curious, what is, like, when you say personal life is first, what does that mean? So looking after family, looking after yourself, like.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's three, we typically break it down into life into three main buckets, and there's a little bit more than that, but there's yourself, there's your relationships, and then there's your wealth. And when I talk about personal life, I'm talking about who you are as an individual and breaking it down to the core. So not only your personality, but also your soul, and getting in alignment with who you are. I'll give you an example. We work with high-performing professionals all the time, and one of the biggest challenges they face is, who am I outside of my business role?
Sure, yeah.
So identifying who that is and what that person represents is very important, because once you get in alignment with that, you become far more powerful. It's like, how do I say, greasing the wheels. Right. So rather than feeling like you're in conflict or resistance and constantly challenged, it feels more natural to you, and you're actually flowing rather than actually struggling and using sheer grit and resilience. So there's the personal side in terms of self. There's also health too, which a lot of people struggle with. Yeah. I would say from our research, and I can get into that because we have worked significantly in the research realm, partnering with over 17 universities and research institutions in Canada and the US. Wow. With high performance when it comes to business professionals. And over 3/4 of these individuals struggle with their health in some way, shape, or form. So making sure that you are healthy is very important, because I think a lot of people don't even realize it. They may feel like they're in good health, but it's not until they actually get into better health they realize, wow, like what I was feeling before is nothing compared to how I feel now. So health is important. And then obviously relationships. which I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, strong relationships can make you, and some of those tough relationships can break an individual. And we see that happen all the time. Very successful people that are making a lot of money or growing their businesses significantly, who literally overnight they're just broken or shattered because whether it's a divorce or a challenge with their kids or a parent or sibling, whatever it is, it plays a huge toll on them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, so if you could, let's go back in time a little, because I'm curious. I mean, this is really cool. First of all, so thank you for sharing that, because I love this idea of the 3 buckets, and I can identify already with each one of those 3. And I want to dive into it more in a bit, but I'd like to learn a little bit more about you right now. Like, what is it? What happened to Purdeep that made you this way?
It was a series of events. I do know where to start, but I would say all paths led to this point, and it was part of who I am. So I grew up in Kelowna, British Columbia, and nice. I grew up on an orchard. Yeah, beautiful place.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Undiscovered at that time. No one really knew what Kelowna was, and they would hear it. They're like, okay, where is that? It was a small, you can say, city. Less than 100,000 people when I grew up there, but it's predominantly valleys, orchards, vineyards, lake, ski hill. A beautiful place to grow up. It was very, I'm going to say, small town before, and I grew up on an orchard. So when my parents immigrated from India, all they knew how to do was really sheer work ethic, right? And they got manual labor jobs. They were working on an orchard until they saved up and bought their own. But I was literally born and raised on an orchard, which had its pros. At that time, I thought it was a lot of cons, because I would have to wake up at sometimes 3:30 in the morning and get up and work. And, all my friends would be traveling during the summer or doing camps, and I'd be on the orchard. So it was kind of a con at that time, but it was such a pro because I spent the entire day in nature.
Right.
And some days I spent not even speaking to another human being, because I would be out there doing something in the orchard by myself, some kind of a job where I was just interacting with nature, the birds, the trees, the blossoms. And it was incredible because it was just such a phenomenal upbringing, because I would literally walk around and just look at the trees for hours and just be like, oh, this tree grew like this. And, the blossoms are out. So I noticed these little things that I don't think, I know a lot of people today take for granted. So that was one aspect of it. I think that it had a huge impact. The other aspect was my parents just growing up in the Indian culture. So I also grew up in more of a traditional gender type of household where men did the hard work and labor and women did more of the cooking and stuff and taking care of the children. But my parents, it was a little bit different because they both had to take care of us. They both had to work hard. So my mom was working just as hard as my dad, but still the traditional, the man is the head of the household. And for us, that actually worked out very well. Like for our family, that was actually very conducive to how we worked. And my dad, unfortunately, there were some challenges because my dad did everything for us. He did everything for us as a family. He did everything for his business, gave money back to his family in India to help them at that time. And he felt a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of unfulfillment, or you can say lack of satisfaction for him. And he struggled with alcoholism as a result, which is very common with a lot of particularly men and even women now, where they do everything for everybody else and leave themselves last, and then they struggle with some kind of an addiction or some other challenge to make up for it. Right. So I saw a dad who was very, how do I say it? He was great when he was sober, and he was a big guy too. But when he was a little bit too drunk, he was scary. Right. And sometimes something happened in his childhood. I don't know what, he never spoke about it, but he would wake up with night terrors. And if he was drunk in the middle of that, it was like a bomb went off in the house and I would just freak out, right? It was very scary being a young boy at that time, and challenging for my mom as well. So they had a challenging dynamic there. So I saw that. I grew up with that, and I was always wondering. So I started to study, you can say, human psychology at a very young age, indirectly trying to figure out how my dad would react. And I would know when my dad would drink before I think even my dad knew. I would watch his behaviors and his mannerisms, and I would go to my mom, he's going to drink today. My mom would be like, no, he's not going to drink. He promised he wouldn't drink today. And lo and behold, he would drink, because I could just see the pattern. And then layered on top of that was my grandfather. So my dad's dad, who immigrated over from India, he So my great grandfather was a spiritual teacher in India,
Okay.
and my grandfather was a very spiritual man, but he also was in the army. So he was in the army in India for 35 plus years, and taught me all these principles of values and principles and morals, and your word is your bond, and also the difference between masculinity and femininity, and meditation and mindfulness. So all of these things kind of led me to my path today, where I actually started to study neuroscience at a very young age, psychology at a very young age, both academically and informally as well, which gives me a unique insight, because now when I work with business professionals, I've you can say I have gone to 6 different business schools, both in Canada and the US. I've led businesses, was an executive in the corporate world for 14 years. So did very well from a career perspective before I had my own firm. So when we work with individuals, what I found was we have a significant benefit, because now we understand the psychology and the science behind how the brain works and how individuals work. And just, I'm going to add on this last point. There's one other thing that happened that just helped me, you can say, accelerate my skills, was when I was 17, I was a personal trainer, and I was helping other people get fit. I've always been into fitness, and it was a passion of mine, and it's a passion of mine to help other people. And I would put together these programs for them, workout programs, diet programs, and 80% of them wouldn't do it. They wanted to be healthy. They wanted to, whether it was be better fit or have more muscle, whatever it was, look better, but 80% wouldn't do it. And I realized there's something behind this. And that's really where I took a look at the psychology of change and performance, and understood at that time, and through research and learning, is that just because we know how to do something doesn't mean we're actually going to do it. There's all of these other things that can stop us, like how much energy we have, our support network. Do we truly believe that we deserve it? And these are all underlying beliefs that we all have as human beings that slow us down or stop us from getting the things that we want. So fast forward, I've been studying neuroscience and neuropsychology and high performance psychology for 30 plus years now, which has led me to where we are today.
That's awesome. What a story. I'm just going to throw this out here because if you're listening to this, you won't know. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be like, what do you mean 30 years? You look like you're 25, dude. Like, come on. So you must be doing something right.
Yeah, exactly. It's my wife, because she helps with the longevity and looking good. She's kind of in the biohacking functional medicine space. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wicked. So you touched on a little bit, and I guess I'm curious, from the perspective of personal training to corporate training, or helping executives today. And, you've got these 3 buckets, which I guess is part of this process, but what is it that stops people from doing things? Because I see this regularly all the time in the work that I do too, is it like, yeah, I really wanted to do this and I've got all the tools to do it. And then it just never happens. So it's a weird phenomenon. I'm wondering if you could unpack that for us.
Break it down. Yeah. Break down the change. Actually, it's funny. You say that. I'm actually doing a talk next week, a speaking event for professional women in leadership executive roles. And it's around this concept of change and why people don't change. And one of the key reasons, well, there's 2 aspects to it. One is, it is a series of beliefs that we have internally that we have to uncover and bring to the surface and see if those beliefs are actually valid. For example, if we don't want it bad enough, and if we don't believe we are worthy of it, we're not going to do what we need to do to get it. And on the surface level, it seems like a lot of people feel that way, but they don't. Internally, they have a belief system where perhaps their parents have said, or one of their parents has said, hey, look, if you have too much money, you're going to be stuck up, or you're going to be different in a different, and that happens for a lot of people, right? That was one of the beliefs in our family too, right? You can't have too much money because, people change at that time.
Right.
So you have to uncover those beliefs that are in there. So beliefs could stem from, it could be, you don't deserve it. I don't believe in my skills. I don't know how is a big one too. And even if I do know how, and I believe that I can do it in my own abilities, sometimes people just don't believe it's truly possible. But the other 2 big factors are also the energy levels that an individual has, because our biggest resource, most important resource, is energy. It's not necessarily time. And that is very important. And most people don't understand that. because that in itself is a huge learning. And when individuals understand that they need to monetize and they need to appreciate their energy and use it wisely, and there's an opportunity cost for energy, and how to actually increase your energy, that's what is a big component to change. And here's why. We all come across obstacles. What the difference is that if I have let's just say you and I are both trying to do something and it's the same thing and we come across the same obstacle. Well, if you have more energy than I do, because I'm drained in some other aspect of my life or whatever it is, you're more likely to achieve it because you're going to get through that obstacle.
Right.
So energy management is very important. And the other one is a support system. And so the support system is critical because we as human beings need support. We are social beings. And if we don't have the right people in our lives to support us and guide us along the way, that can be somewhat of a detriment. This whole concept of a lone ranger doesn't work. There's no one that's achieved anything great by themselves. It's just a fallacy. It's not real. It's not true. So you have to have the right people on your team. Out of all of those things, one of the things that I would say is the most important thing is the energy part. Because people, if you take a look at one of the biggest challenges a lot of people have is they just don't have enough energy to do things because they're drained, either cognitively, emotionally, or physically.
Right. What are the things that you do day to day I mean, you talked about your wife helping with, some, I don't want to say biohacking, but certainly, there's stuff in there, but what do you do to, you're not out in the orchard anymore?
No, yeah. And I wish I was actually. So that's one of the things I'm trying to convince my wife to go back to, right? It's on the other side of the country, but meditation and mindfulness practices, they're not necessarily the same, but those are two practices that I do. Daily walks, if that's very, very important, and exercise. Those are things that I absolutely do. And I spend time with my kids and my family and my wife because having those relationships in my life are very, very important. So I have identified for myself what brings me energy, and I think everybody is a little bit different. And so for me, what brings me energy might not be the same thing as someone else. Like you might have activities or hobbies that bring you energy that might not bring me energy. So everybody's a little bit different.
Are you an extrovert or introvert or an ambivert?
I'm kind of both ends of the spectrum. So I'm both. I don't mind being in you can say events or social settings where there's a lot of people. I can actually thrive in that as well. And then I don't mind being by myself. So it's kind of a give and take for me. I would say I'm kind of right in the middle there.
Right on. Do you make time to read?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that's probably one of the most important things that I do. People ask me all the time, because I work with CEOs, I work with board chairs and people, high performing, highly successful individuals. And they're like, well, what do you think is a one thing that can change a person's level of performance or success or whatever it might be? And there is no one thing, but one of the most important things is the ability to learn and the desire to learn. And reading is obviously a core aspect of that. Reading is something that so one of the things that I did when I was younger, at a very young age, so I'm talking about around 12 years old, was I actually started to study the brain. And at that time, neuroscience wasn't a huge thing, but brain training was. It was starting to become a little bit more popular in Europe, not necessarily North America. And I started to speed read. So I learned how to speed read and how to have a photographic memory. And I would say probably that's one of the most important things that I ever did was speed reading, because it allowed me to read a lot faster and consume information. So I'm an avid reader for sure.
What's on your top, I don't know, let's say 3 books. What do you recommend?
And it
doesn't have to be business books too. It could just be like, I really like Fox and Socks or whatever. I
would say that they're probably kind of not in the business realm, but obviously there is a classical Think and Grow Rich,
right?
By Napoleon. That one, that for me just always stands out the most. There is the War of Art.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that one, Stephen Pressfield or Press, I can't remember. That's another one that stands out for me the most because it talks about resistance, and we all come across resistance. Yeah. And then I'm a big fan of, The Power of Now, for example. And I think being present is very, very important, and it's something that we miss out on completely. Those are important. Those are good books for me. One of the other books I would recommend everybody read, because I think it's going to be a very important skill going forward for every single human being, especially if you want to have a competitive advantage, is Peak Mind by Amisha Jha. And it's basically around the topic of focus and attention. That's an area that we actually did a lot of research in. And it is so important because the ability for people to focus and keep their attention these days is dwindling.
Yeah.
And that is it is, as a human being, it is, aside from energy, it is another key resource. And we have to think about it as a resource, because we can only focus on so many things during the day.
Right.
And let's just say we have 100 units of focus throughout the day. Well, if our focus is being diverted or pulled, in which it is intentionally to social media or these other channels or whatever it might be, well, guess what? We're taking that, let's just say 20 units has gone to social media. 20 units has gone to emails. Now we have 60 units left to focus on the things that we want to focus on, the things that are most important to us. And so I do believe that that is going to be a competitive advantage for individuals going forward, for those who can focus better.
Wow. That's a really clarifying. I forget who I was talking to recently, but they said that long form content is dead, and I rallied against it, because I don't think it is. I think that long form content still has a place. I think that books still have a place on a shelf. I think that podcasts that are not 1 minute long, that are 30 to 45 minutes, shameless plug, it is, you get more depth, you get more from it than just this surface topical stuff that we see so much today. So I like hearing you say that attention is important.
Yeah, and I think the long form content will stay, and it's still going to be there. It'll be interesting to see what happens with AI, but I think it's for a very specific group now. And I do see that group dwindling, because people, like, even for myself in this area, because I do a lot of mindfulness practices, which is the one thing, it's the one practice and one of the only practices, if not the only practice, that has been shown to help improve attention and focus. But I find myself, and especially last year, I found myself, my attention really dropping, and to the point where I couldn't really focus. And I was just like, what's going on? And it's because my attention was being pulled in so many different ways and in directions. And I went back and I had to remove some apps from my phone. They weren't necessarily even social media, some certain things that was drawing my attention. And I had to retrain my brain again. And so I think, and I'm seeing this more and more of a trend, but I think the people that appreciate focus and attention are going to be the ones that are I'm going to say kind of like the, not the dying breed, but they're still going to be around, but there's going to be less and less of us.
Yeah. And I don't know. This makes me wonder if it's an evolutionary trait, is losing our attention. Will shorter attention be a benefit? Do we need to consume these little snippets and, get rid of them? Or is it just a dopamine hit every time we get check out the email? Oh, I got an email. I got to check it out right now. Oh, it's not what I wanted. Oh, it's what I wanted. Is that really, are we just chumming the waters?
Yeah. And I would say, because we are the main thing that we do. So we do business growth and scaling and profits. The other one is performance, and performance for business, but performance for individuals. So we have a lot of research. We have a lot of studies. So I can talk about this fairly confidently. The answer is no. Short form content, being, people that are constantly on their phones or switching, just because they have easy access doesn't mean that they're performing better and they have better productivity. They actually have the reverse. So people who are able to focus longer and spend longer blocks of their time doing an activity are the ones that are actually more productive. So things like these shorter videos are not helping people, because if we think about how we learn, right? How we learn is very important. And no one really taught us how to learn throughout school. And no one teaches us how to learn. Like, you literally have to be outside of school to learn how to learn. Yeah. And one of the key aspects is, to learn, we have to integrate the stuff that we learn into our lives. And how often does a person who reads a quick snippet, whatever it is, integrate that into their life? They don't.
Right.
So they're they're skimming the surface of the material, but it's not actually having an impact on their brain and changing their behavior and learning properly. So they're not actually learning to the degree that they should be.
Yeah, far out. I just saw a thing with Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about something very similar, because they were talking about testing and about how, will AI get rid of, people are using AI to write reports and stuff like that. And he was just like, well, yeah, of course they are. Like, why wouldn't you? And
Yeah.
rocks, because that's Ontario in a nutshell. And you're thinking to yourself, um, you know, I just wish the world knew this one thing. Like, if I could just share this one thing with the world, what would that one thing be?
Wow. You know what? It would probably be this. If we actually got to the core of who we are, I do believe that the vast majority of people would be a lot happier, that we would have far less crime. We wouldn't have these wars. And when I say who we are as individuals, I'm talking about at the soul level, like deep down inside of us. Because if we take a look at how we are born, babies, they're born innocent.
Right.
And everybody loves babies. And whenever there's a baby in the household, there's like complete love.
Right.
Right. And then people forget their worries. People forget. And why? It's because that baby emanates basically pure love.
Right.
That's what it is. There's the baby's not tainted. It doesn't care. Then they've shown this through research, the color of your skin and stuff like that. The baby is just there to be loved and kind of give out love. And so I think if we have that approach to life and get back to who we are, because everyone wants to be loved at the core. And when we feel like we're loved and we feel like we're special to somebody else, we're okay saying, hey, maybe we can have a little bit less. Right? I don't need to steal your stuff because I feel loved or whatever that is. Obviously, there's basic necessities, right? But even with basic necessities, if we were who we truly are, we would give more of those basic necessities out to other people. There's no shortage of food in the world. There's no shortage of shelter. It's a shortage of sharing.
Right.
That's essentially what it is. And we could get to that point if we actually went to the core of who we are. And I'm saying at the individual level as well. And there's two reasons for that. One is A, because I think we would be better as society. B, because I believe that people would be happier themselves. And I'll give you an example. My wife, she has this innate ability, and I'm going to say this God-given talent to play the piano and listen to music and pick up on the tones. Like, she is one of those individuals that she can listen to a song and play it on the piano after a couple of times.
Wow.
That's her given talent, right? I tell her all the time, she should be just playing the piano all the time, because it's not only beautiful for her, it's beautiful for me and the kids. It's just amazing. But then she has all those other things, right? She's got to she has her profession and expectations from her parents, and, maybe even expectations from me and the kids, and all these things that kind of put these layers on top of her that sometimes I think she feels like she's not able to do that.
Are you familiar with Ikigai?
Yes.
And is that kind of what we're talking about? The, life's purpose, or where your passion and purpose meet?
Yes. Yeah, because we do have, and it's, what I call, it's basically a formula for energy. And those are two P's, and there's other, I could call P's as well. like progress, for example, primary values, power, and that creates energy. So when your passion and your purpose align, that is probably the most powerful force that you have. And the reason why I share this is not only we're not talking about just spiritual principles, we're talking about scientific principles, because studies actually show now that when people are passionate about doing something, you can see that there's certain neurotransmitters in their brain that actually there's a higher level of them, which means there's more brain activity and cell activity. So people
a legal entity, but I mean that it's a reflection of the people that build it. And if you don't have purpose behind it, then why build it? And how will you continue to build it in the best possible way if you don't have that passion and purpose behind it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you, because that purpose, ultimately, it's a series of questions. That's what purpose is. And asking one of the questions is why. Like, why does this brand exist? Why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah.
And that is very, very important, because, studies show this all the time, the more emotions that we tie to something in particular, an action or behavior, the more likely we are to actually be persistent, consistent, and resilient when it comes to that behavior.
Yeah. Far out. Well, if you could go back in time again for me, and I love this idea of you on the orchard and noticing trees. And I guess, you seem like a really together guy. We haven't spent a lot of time together, but you certainly have given a lot of thought to this stuff. And would that be part of the, a recommendation or practice, I guess, that you would go back to be out in nature and, notice things again?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's so fundamental. And if you take a look at, Asian tradition of cherry blossoms, there's a reason for it, right? It's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. And not just cherries, apples too, any fruits that's out there. It's just an amazing sight when you go through, and it just gives an appreciation for life and nature. Nature carries a natural energy and a frequency. For me, I just feel completely different when I'm in nature. And for the vast majority of people, they do too. And they've shown this through studies, because there's a vibration, there's a frequency, there's energy that comes from nature. And when people are grounded in that, they actually feel different. They change. Their biology changes. Hopefully I'm answering your question, but my wish is for my kids to spend more time in the orchard. Absolutely. Because I want them to experience that and just have an appreciation for. Here's the funny thing. Watching trees grow, it's not a fast thing. It's not a overnight thing. It's not a, hey, look, it's not a quick fix or a hack.
Right.
It requires its patience, it's noticing, it's focusing, it's being attentive, and it's also being within yourself as a human being. So, I can still remember these moments where we just planted trees, and once you plant them and then you give them water a few days later, you can see, they change a little bit.
Yeah.
And you walk around and you say, wow, like I planted that tree. And then 10 years later, you see that tree and what it's turned into. 20 years later, 30 years later, there's a natural progression of life that I think is so beautiful, especially, and this is why, I'm not going to stereotype and say older people, but older people have more time to do this. Things like gardening.
Right.
And why so many people in that category, in that age group, love to garden, because it brings a sense of peace, and there's energy behind it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it kind of makes me, I decided that I'm going to learn how to grow an avocado today. Just
An avocado. Wow. Interesting. Well, if you figure it out, let me know.
yeah, I don't know. It was like one of those things where I'm really on an avocado kick, and I just really don't like the idea of getting rid of the seed. I'm just like, well, like it's this huge thing, right? And I'm just like, can't I just grow an avocado from this? And apparently you can. So that's going to be the next thing. So maybe I'm now in that older bracket where I'm just like, I want to see things grow.
That's your next venture. Actually, that's cool. You gave me an idea because our family loves avocados too. So that would be a neat experiment.
It's a thing that you poke them with toothpicks and you put them in water and then the roots come out and then it's a whole thing. I'm really excited by it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
A friend of mine grew a pineapple and he's got it in his office and he's been growing it for 5 years or something. And there's no fruit yet. It's just this thing that's growing.
That's so hilarious.
Funny. Man. What's your guilty pleasure? What's the thing that you do just for Purdeep?
Guilty pleasure. Okay, so that goes. That's a tricky one. My guilty pleasure is I like to have a drink every so often.
Yeah.
I don't drink nearly as much as I used to. Back in my 20s, I would say definitely partied hard. But that would be one. And then I also like chocolate and ice cream. So I do have a sweet tooth, and if there's a chocolate bar that's open around me and it's one of my favorites, it's like, okay, it's gone.
Okay, so I got to dig into this. First of all, what's the drink of choice for Purdeep? Like, is it a dank scotch? Is it a nice cold beer on a hot day? Like, what does that look like?
Well, in the summer, cold beers are awesome. I definitely like a cold beer in the summer. I don't drink that much beer though, but I will definitely drink a scotch, maybe a single malt. And trying new things. I'm not a scotch snob by any means, but I do like to try scotch and then other kinds of whiskey. And then ever since Yellowstone, I've been on, trying a little bit of bourbon or something a little bit different as well, just to try things, something new. And how about yourself?
I stopped drinking a year and a half ago, just because I went on this wicked fitness journey. But I love scotch. Like I love like a dank, peaty, right from the Highlands. Scotch
the Highlands,
with a nice cigar.
Oh, right on.
Yeah,
nice.
That's my guilty pleasure. And when I get my body to where I want it to be, then I'll go back to, sitting on the patio and enjoying that. But right now, it's all focused on, at the gym every day. And,
good for you.
Yeah, getting it done.
Well, it's funny, you say that, and yeah, when I go on a fitness kind of a streak too, my body just doesn't want to drink.
Yeah.
Right. You just don't have that desire.
Yeah. It's like, it's just not even a thing. It's in the, I've got other stuff I'm focused on. I was trying to get ready for a big run with my parents, like my dad.
Oh,
we did a couple of half marathon relays with my kids and my dad out on Vancouver Island, which was awesome. So I was getting into shape for that. Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. It's changed. It's funny how things change and how you're, you don't think about it. But I also love chocolate, like dark 90-95% cacao chocolate.
Really? Dark? Yeah. That dark? Wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a good stuff.
And it's healthy for you. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently. So yeah, I could eat that all day long.
Yeah, that's great. And how old is your dad?
He's turning 80 this year.
Wow. That's pretty good. Good for him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, both my parents are kick-ass. They're very, very fit. Out there always doing stuff. My mom plays badminton. She recently took up pickleball. My dad still runs. And if you listen to this, he'll be all embarrassed, but I think he set another world record like a year and a half ago on a 4x400 relay with some other guys. Yeah. For his age group, not like a world record for, the time. But yeah, no, they kick ass.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're inspiring for sure.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's wild. Okay, so let's go back to you for a second. What is your? Let's frame it this way. So there's people out in the world, because this is sort of your world, your CEO type people, your executives that you're helping, but there's executives that maybe don't know how to ask for help. Mm-hmm. We'll say, and or they don't they're about to, and they just don't know what to do next. And I'm not using this as a pitch so much for your services, but what advice would you give for them to, take that next step, or to, maybe find that passion again, or that purpose?
Yeah, that's really it's a really interesting question, and it just so happens that majority of the people that we work with, 85% of them are actually men, and I can tell you, men are the most stubborn of all, because we don't like to admit that we need to do something different, even though inside we do. So it is a group of people we are very familiar with, and this applies, a certain amount to women as well. But women are way more open to actually getting advice and doing things differently, or searching out things and talking to their friends and social network than men are. It's a different world for sure. So for men, I always encourage, and I think one of the biggest things that has helped me throughout my life, and I'm so lucky to have this, and that I think we are losing sight of more and more these days, is mentorship and finding a mentor. And it doesn't have to be a person. The best mentors in my life they weren't successful people. They weren't rich. They were just everyday people. My grandfather, for example, even my dad outside of his challenges, friends. I was lucky enough to have great mentors in my life. And I think that has a huge impact for being a starting point for men. If we can find someone that we are comfortable just having a conversation with and saying, hey, look, in this type of a situation, what would you do? That can open up the doors completely.
Yeah.
Because for men in particular, one of the things that we need to acknowledge is that we're not the only ones going through this. There are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of men going through pretty much almost, I'm not going to say the exact same thing, but very similar. So whether you have a failing relationship, there's tons of guys out there like that. You got poor health, tons of guys out there like that. You're losing money, tons of guys out there. You got tons of money, but you're still not happy. Lots of guys out there like, you could name it. There's other men, and I'm going to say women as well, that are experiencing something very similar. So you're not the only one. And I think the moment that we realize we're not the only ones, we can give ourselves some grace and say, well, I'm not a failure. This is happening to other people. So that is one thing. I always encourage people to go on YouTube. Check out YouTube. It's fascinating what you can find on YouTube. If you're feeling unfulfilled, type it in and see if there's something that pops up. And the moment that, I think for the vast majority of people, when I come across, and even from my own experience, how they've changed or when they've changed, it just happens. They've come across some kind of information, whether it was on YouTube or book, or someone said something where something has clicked for them. And that moment has gotten them to think different. And as a result of that, they are able to do things slightly different, or they're curious about that. And so I always encourage people just to be open to the idea of learning new things and checking out information out there. I think that would be a starting point.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
you inspired a question, and that is, what is the one thing that you have always wanted to do that you haven't done yet that you're going to do next?
Oh yeah. So that's a safari in Kenya. That's on my list.
That was like right there.
Yeah. It's been it's been there. It's on the list. I want to take my kids to it. My wife, possibly my mom. We'll see if she's up for it.
Yeah.
But that's on my list. I love animals. I've always wanted to go on a safari. I wanted my kids to go. So they're 8 and 10 years old. So they're at age where they can actually go. Yeah. So that is next on my list.
Oh, I'm so excited for you.
I'm excited too. Actually, every time I hear so, I just spoke to someone last week who just went on a safari, and I was just like, "Oh, what was it like?" So it's exciting. I'm looking forward to doing that.
Oh, that's wild. A friend of mine, I don't know where they were exactly, but I just saw their posts on Instagram. They were doing a tour through India, and they're like elephants, and there's like all sorts of animals. And it was beautiful. Like, it was so cool.
That's another one on the list. Take my kids back to where my parents are from and show them, give them a little bit of history.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be huge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Well, Purdeep, this has been time well spent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. And I can't wait to learn more about what you're up to.
Yeah, well, whatever I can help with, I'm out there. We got our podcast too. Not that I'm trying to make a pitch, but
No, do it. Pitch it, because we'll put it in the show notes and all that stuff.
yeah. So we have the Complete Man, which I focus on, everything to do with men, kind of challenges, issues, topics, and been doing that for a number of years, and that seems to be popular for guys. It's 5 minutes, and we just talk about everyday life of being a guy. So it's something I'm passionate about.
Oh, I love that. And actually, if you don't mind it, I wouldn't mind asking you another question about that. Is it, do you have backlash is the wrong word. Do you run into a challenge where people are just like, oh, like, why just about guys?
Yeah, typically. So when I started, we created a niche specifically for men about 6-7 years ago. And the podcast is probably 5 or 6 years old by now. I can't remember, but yeah, absolutely. We used to get so both men and women. We used to get a lot of weird looks from women or some comments from women. But here's the interesting thing: when women understand what we do,
yeah,
that it's really about a holistic approach, helping men be better husbands and fathers too. They're our biggest advocates.
Sure,
they are like they love it. They love what we're about, what we do. And especially a lot of women these days are kind of tired of the whole, not necessarily excluding men, but making men feel like, we're less than now, because society has changed significantly. And in some areas, it's almost like a detriment to be a male. And right. Especially in maybe even the corporate world, a lot of males get discriminated against. And that's a different story. That's a different thing. But it was, yeah, definitely. And the interesting thing for me was when men would say that. When men would say, hey, look, isn't that sexist that you're just helping men? And that was a very interesting, you can say, time for us, because we knew we were onto something.
Huh.
Because there's tons of women-focused, female-focused groups, like entrepreneurial groups, self-help groups, mother groups, whatever it is. But there's not that many for men. There are more now. There's like dad groups, for example, and
sure.
But there's not as many for men when you actually take a look at it. And so it was an interesting take, and it told us a lot when it comes to masculinity, because people have a misconception about masculinity. And when people truly understand what that is, and when we do work with men, that's a core aspect that we take a look at, is masculinity and the importance of it and how it balances with femininity and how the two work together. It becomes very, very powerful. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but
this is great, man. I love it.
It was a big challenge, and I do believe it is something that the next generation in particular needs to be educated about, because I very openly and firmly say they don't make men like they used to. And men are not being taught how to be, I'm going to say, what we call mindful alpha males. And there's two aspects to that. Every man should be an alpha male, because we are the creators of our lives. If we don't take control of our own lives, then we become followers. And being a follower isn't that great, especially if you're following someone that doesn't have great ethics or morals or whatever that looks like. In fact, that's what we're seeing a lot of in today's society, where we have men who are belligerent, bad leaders, and other men following them.
Right.
And not stepping up. Yeah, I wonder who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Clearly doing things that are not appropriate, and lying, and causing violence and all these other things, and men are not standing up to them. So that is one aspect. But the other aspect is the mindful approach. And this is something that I learned from my grandfather, because he was both in the spiritual realm, but also in war. And so it was a balance between the two. Wow. And so it's very important for us as men to also be mindful of our actions and what the impact is on our words and our behavior.
Purdeep, I love it. That's a great place to end. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been outstanding.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And thank you so much again.
I've been your host, Michael Dargie, and this has been the RebelRebel Podcast. It's a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. And hey, if you're a rebel or you know a rebel, why don't you head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out our guest request form. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, and maybe we can share your story with the world. Don't forget to like, share, or subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and thanks so much for listening. Until next time.